Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone here in Baku, and good morning, good evening to those who are watching us online. We are gathered here at the Net Zero Pavilion, courtesy of the World Nuclear Association. Special thanks to them for hosting this event, which has been organized by the African Young Generation in Nuclear, a continental network bringing all the young professionals in nuclear across Africa. Perhaps to say something little about the continental network, it's an affiliate to the International Youth Nuclear Congress, which is a global network for the future leaders in the nuclear science and technology. And currently, the network has presence in 22 African countries. I may mention a few of them, especially those who have committed to tripling nuclear by 2050. Of course, South Africa is the only country with operational nuclear power plant. So we have a chapter in South Africa. We have Kenya, which signed the commitment the other day. We have Nigeria, we have Ghana, we have Morocco, we have Egypt, and other countries, totaling to 22 countries. We hope to reach all the IEA member states in the near future, where we want to create a platform for the youth to be meaningfully engaged in nuclear advocacy and promoting peaceful applications of nuclear science and technology in Africa. So today we are privileged to have very eminent personalities in the industry who will share with us their insights on how we can go about engaging the young professionals in influencing the national acceptance of nuclear technology in Africa or even beyond the African borders. We understand that this industry is plagued with negativity, where a lot of anti-nuclear lobby groups continue to propagate misinformation, non-factual information about the nuclear technology and its applications. A case example is the recent happenings in Kenya, where the community, where the nuclear project has been cited to be constructed, the community are against the project because they are misinformed, and there is a lot of propaganda around the nuclear power plants. So today we want to really see how well we can engage, involve, and actually energize the young people in the industry to see how well we can influence the public acceptance towards nuclear technology. So I want to introduce my speakers, but I'll give them opportunity to introduce before I pose the questions for discussion. So to my left is Didier. I'll give you the opportunity to introduce.
Thank you for inviting me, and I will try to introduce myself briefly. So I'm not young, and I'm not African either, but it's almost 30 years that I'm in the business field, and clearly it's a pleasure really to talk to young professionals in this business. I worked for EDF for a while, and I've been engineering manager for Nuclear Island for Olkiluoto 3, Flamanville 3. I worked also for Chernobyl to try to remedy to the accident in Unit 4. I've been also nuclear power plant manager, so I have a great experience in terms of nuclear business, and it's a pleasure to share that with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Chesori and AYGN, for inviting me. My name is Princess Mthombeni. Many people call me Princey. I am from South Africa. I work as a communication specialist at the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation. I've been there for 13 years, so I am not young. I'm no longer young. But it's difficult in this industry. You see, when you start joining these young YGN, you stay young forever, and people fail to realize that we grow up. Over and above me being a communication specialist, I'm also a founder of Africa for Nuclear, which is a campaign that promotes nuclear on the African continent. And I think I have been doing pretty well because I responded to the Kenyan anti-nuclear lobbyists when they went on media to start talking negatively about the Kenya nuclear build program that has been announced. And I must say the communication reached its intended audience, but I hope that it reaches even a bigger audience, because the intention should be about educating people and not responding to allegations of anti-nuclear lobbyists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Princey. Of course, young is relative. What matters a lot is spirit. So you are young at heart, and appreciate that. So I want to just start off this discussion. It's gonna be interactive because it's an open kind of discussion where we want to hear the insights from the panelists here, and also as audience, you feel free to make contributions when your time comes. So I want to open the discussion by asking a question to my first speaker. In your own perspective, maybe based on the experiences that you have had, you are not from Africa, you are from outside there, but from a global perspective, what do you think the African countries can do to mainstream the youth engagement in the nuclear science and technology, and more so the advocacy initiatives? Thank you.
Basically, what we're going to do is that Africa is going to have exactly the same issues as other countries. You need a lot of energy, and you need a lot of energy low carbon. That's a principle. And if you want really to have an energy mix that is efficient, you will need low carbon energy, but dispatchable also. And you have only two pillars in terms of low carbon energy dispatchable: is hydraulic or nuclear. So if you have a lot of hydraulic, you can move forward, and would recommend that you move forward as much as you can in hydraulic when you can have this possibility. But it's not the case for all the countries. And in this case, you need to back up with really dispatchable energy, and nuclear energy is a really good energy for that. So basically, Africa will surge in terms of energy demand, and you will need to back up your deployment and your development with energy, a lot of energy. And clearly, nuclear would be part of the game. And it's young generations that will support that, because we're talking about commitment. We're talking about nuclear with 30 years that I'm in this business, but actually nuclear, it's a long-term commitment, a very long-term commitment. And basically only the youth can support that for the future. So to advocate that, I would say, since nuclear requires a long commitment from the politics and the politicians, we need to convince the public opinion that it's a good way, to manage the energy transition. And for that, we need to, I would say, back up the public acceptance. And youth is key in this business, because we need to convince the young generation and next generation that actually nuclear is key in the development of the country. So really, we can discuss a little bit more in interactive session how to do that. But my belief is that we need to plan the future, and the future it's young generation for sure.
Thank you so much. I think basing on that, from the African context, Princess, maybe you can bring out the challenges that the young people and also the governments facing in really mainstreaming young people in the nuclear science and technology field.
Thank you for that. One thing I always say is that we are being unfair to young people, because the people who should be really putting the responsibility of maybe empowering or dragging young people into the industry are our leaders. Why would young people go to something where there's nothing? Because if the decision to build nuclear programs is not taken, why should I study nuclear, and why should I even care about nuclear? So the responsibility lies with our leaders. But also, as young people, maybe I would say our responsibility lies with influencing these leaders, because at the end of the day, they say people shall govern, and young people are also part of the citizens that should govern. So I think what we can do as young people to attract more young people to take leadership in our industry is to sell solutions. If I know the risk of not having this thing, or of not taking the responsibility of selling this thing to other young people, then I think it's a matter of selling the solution to young people, and the risks that are involved in not taking the solution that is being proposed on us. So I would just say that let's go to young people and sell the nuclear as the solution, and especially when we talk about the problems that are facing our continent, because over and above power, we have problems of people not having enough. We don't have jobs, and people end up migrating to other countries. And so, I always say no one wants to be an immigrant in other countries. If Africa would be able to absorb all the professionals that are immigrants in other countries, they would come back, gladly come back and help in developing their countries. So I think that's what I want to say.
Thank you so much for that. You mentioned very critical aspects here, like attracting young people to nuclear careers. And if you really look at the African map, many of those countries do not have nuclear education programs. Perhaps it's something that we need to look at how well we can position the continent to engage the young people in the nuclear education and training. And some IEA and other stakeholders are playing a critical role. I want maybe you make a comment on the careers for the youth and what is happening at the global scale.
So maybe obviously we see the example of South Africa when we developed the two story reactors in Quebec that are the sister ship actually of Cruas in France. And when we developed this program at that time, it was also with young people because it was necessary to start from scratch and so on. And we see a lot of countries now in Africa interested in nuclear. We have Ghana, Kenya, we have also Morocco, Tunisia, trying to step in this business and to frame careers for young generation in order, to be ready, to accommodate a nuclear program. This is something that the IEA also can help. Can help in terms of energy modeling to see what could be the energy mix in the future, the best one in terms of shares of renewables plus nuclear, and also to train the people. And we have some excellent center right now. For instance, in Morocco, they developed an excellent center in terms of nuclear security and safeguards for nuclear. So clearly, we need to have this kind of background of a young, professional, scientific, trained for nuclear in order to accommodate the nuclear program. But this is something that is key. Whatever the case, education is key, whether it's nuclear or not. We need absolutely to go to a strong educational program, but we need to go through scientific program also to be sure that you can also support your development. And nuclear should be part of the game. So as soon as we have that, then we can implement a program. South Africa did it. Other countries should be able, to do it. We had also in Middle East, UAE started from scratch a nuclear program, and 10 years after, they have 4 units, and they have completely a nuclear program in place with professionals trained, and they can also disseminate this kind of action to the world in 10 years. So it's possible, but we need also to educate the people in scientific actions.
Thank you, Didi. And of course, as we train these young people, maybe I must pose another question just to add on that. That yes, some of the countries have trained young people, and they graduate and they come back to their countries, and there are no jobs. So there is an element of like misplaced priorities. So, what maybe, Princess, you may add on that. What can be done to ensure that there is no kind of wastage of resources, training people and no jobs at the same time. And we want at the same time to drive an agenda to influence the national attitude. So
I think what can be done is we need to take a decision to build. We need to make sure that we don't just talk as countries, but we build, we start. You know, we've been talking forever. Kenya has signed an agreement with UK or whoever, whichever country. Ghana has signed, but it's just talks. When are they going to start building? And once they start building, then those resources that that you say get wasted, they will not, because really young people are worried. I get direct messages all the time. People saying, Princey, I'm studying in Russia, I'm studying in France, but what happens after I qualify? Where am I going to find a job? And it really, I don't have answers. I don't. Maybe you can help me what to say to them. Because the only way that they can be useful in their countries is if their countries take a decision to build nuclear power plants so that they can get jobs. That's what we need.
thank you. Yes, the decision is to build nuclear plants, to be taken by government. But now that process is impeded by the negativity. I mean, there is no acceptance, total acceptance. It's not guaranteed. And before maybe we delve on that, because I wanted to see how well we can discuss about the initiatives to really influence the acceptance, national acceptance. Do you have something to add on the lack of unemployment?
Maybe just for sure, I guess I agree 100%. We need to stop talking and start building. That's for sure, and that's not only true for Africa. It's true also for OECD countries and for France in particular. We need really to go through this process, and once you start building, then people are coming. You're attracting a lot of people because it's a real adventure. It's a real human adventure to build something. I've been through 3 types of a mega project like that, and I can tell you, it changes a lot your own attitude, and it makes you growing up. So it's really we need to do that. But obviously, when you're talking about public acceptance or whatever, we've been through years and sometimes decades where people they were fearing about nuclear and only thinking about renewables and so on. Clearly, after the crisis, people they change their mind. Now we know a nuclear renaissance, and we see a lot of young professionals in our countries trying to get that. We need the same path and the same approach in Africa. You have huge demand in terms of energy. You need to have access to a lot of energy. And again, what happened in Africa, it was 25 years ago, could happen right now. It's just a matter of willingness and commitment. So we need to convince the leader, and because the leaders, they are completely dragged by their mandate, and usually it's 4 to 5 years, and every 4 or 5 years they want to be elected, and they follow the wind. So, and the wind is a public opinion. So we need to work on the public opinion that it's really deeply encoded that effectively, nuclear can help the process. And when it is done, then you get a strong commitment, a firm commitment to go to nuclear. And nuclear is not only to build nuclear power plant. It's also to train people. It's also a lot of energy. It's also to change the landscape. It's really an adventure for 100 years. So you change your country and you build strong relationship also with your contractor. So it's really something that is a very long-term commitment, and it will change completely because when you build nuclear, you really need to maintain good relationship with all the nuclear community. So it's not only, I would say, a one-shot approach. It's a route for success.
I want to make 2 points, but before I do, I just want to talk about what you just mentioned, which is the political landscape that changes after 5 years, which is really a problem because nuclear has been too attached to politicians, and it's not good for us. I think as the industry, we need to find a way to lessen the power of politicians when it comes to making decisions about nuclear. And again, I think IAEA, WNA, they need to come around and discuss that, because it's really not helping the industry. Because politicians are about, the fast gains. Why should I make a decision about something that will benefit people after I have long gone? I'm no longer there. So they're about fast gain. So we need to lessen their power when it comes to making decisions about nuclear. But the points that I wanted to make is that number one, Africa is not facing the problem of public acceptance when it comes to nuclear. We are facing an issue of political will. That's number one. We are also facing the issue of lack of knowledge. Coming from South Africa, I realized after joining the industry that many people don't even know there's Uber nuclear power plant in South Africa. So why should they hate something that they don't even know exists? So there's lack of education and awareness of nuclear. And then there's also lack of political will. But when you start talking about nuclear in Africa, people start warming up. I don't think we should be unfair to people of Africa and maybe group them under the same umbrella as anti-nuclear lobbyists. Very few individuals, by the way, who many of them have never even been in those renewables power plants that they are promoting. They've never seen them. They don't even know how they work. So I think we need to separate anti-nuclear lobbyists from the public.
Thank you. You make so strong points there, and I'm tempted to ask because before any country embarks on a nuclear power program, they need the public approval, and I believe that is becoming the impediment in many of these countries who are showing interest to go nuclear. And of course, you mentioned lack of information, lack of knowledge. And I believe that could be a reason why the industry is not attracting many young people to train in the nuclear careers, because they are not aware. So, as a movement of young people and more so associations of professionals who have knowledge about nuclear, what do you say about these strategies that can be employed by the young people to actually advise, or they call it to drive evidence-based advice to policy making that favors nuclear technology acceptance?
Thank you for that. I hope I'm not talking too much. This is what happened in South Africa. I'm going to tell you a story that happened, or an incident that happened in South Africa. A decision was taken to include nuclear in the policy, in the energy roadmap, the integrated resource plan. I think the capacity is 2,500 megawatts. That decision was taken, and now we have the nuclear in the policy, and meaning that the government has to move to the next step. The next step is for the minister to write to the regulator, the energy regulator, to get, we call it concurrence. Yeah, it's Section 34 determination to procure these 2,500 megawatts. That's the next step. Then what the regulator did, they approved, they gave concurrence under, and then it had conditions. We are giving you concurrence, but we have suspensive conditions which we want you to address first before you can move to request for proposals process. It was happening for the very first time in the Section 34 determination process. Other technologies, okay, let me say renewables, they get concurrence without any conditions. Then those conditions were approved. Okay, were addressed by the government, and the regulator eventually gave a concurrence, a clear concurrence without suspensive conditions. Then people, the NGOs, they took the government to court. Obviously, they always find these loopholes. Then that concurrence was withdrawn, meaning we have to start from scratch as the country. Why I'm mentioning this is that when these processes are being made, the people who are sane, the sane people like us. I consider myself sane because I'm not anti anything. I'm just pro progress. They are not part of these processes. The people who can mobilize, by the way, are people who are against progress. So it's us that fail to mobilize people to come and be part of these processes. And we need to discuss amongst ourselves, how can we change that so that when these processes, the public participation processes by government are happening, we are also there. Maybe our voices are even louder than the people who are anti these technologies such as nuclear. So it lies with us. Young people need to start thinking in ways in which they can mobilize the normal people. Work with these NGOs who are not even in energy, make them understand to say how important it is for them to be part of this process, because it's not just about energy. Tell to them it's about solving issues of, in South Africa we have what we call load shedding, power cuts. They are not for it. So you find that when the public participation processes are happening, the majority of people who are commenting are anti it. That's why they are able to win the NGOs at the court, because they submitted, they do a presentation of 20 pages to say why nuclear is not needed in South Africa. And young people, professionals who understand nuclear, they're not there to give their presentation of 80 pages why we need nuclear. So we need to start mobilizing people to be part of these processes.
Thank you. Didier, you have something?
Just to echo on what was just said, we face exactly the same difficulties with NGOs like Greenpeace or whatever. Well, at the top of the agenda, it was not climate change, it was against nuclear. Okay, that was the top of the agenda. Whatever you do, nuclear is a bad thing and so on. But the young generation in Greenpeace, they said to the old people that built actually their career against nuclear, they told them, hey guys, maybe you're wrong. I mean, maybe the real problem is climate change. And if the real problem is climate change, in this case, nuclear is part of the solution. Okay, so hey guys, you need to change your software, and you need to think about solutions, not to tell all the world nuclear is bad. All the people that are working in nuclear are bad people, and they will burn the planet and so on. No, nuclear is part of the solution when we're talking about climate change, and this is true for Europe. This is true for Asia, but this is true for Africa. Actually, it's true for because the climate is changing everywhere. So it's not changing only in Western countries. So we need to really fight against this, and only the young generation can change a little bit the software of these old people that build all their life against the nuclear energy, and they are extremely keen, to change the policy makers, because clearly with court or whatever, action in court and so on, and they can. But now, clearly, with the young generation, they tell what is the real problem. What is the real problem? The real problem is climate change, and nuclear is part of the solution, and that's it. And then in this case, you need to start to be serious about that and to build your nuclear program.
Okay, thank you so much. That's so powerful. Yes, I think it began with looking nuclear as a bad thing, and they have kept that narrative for long. And I think it's high time that we have to undo that narrative with empowerment of the young generation, the future generation. You mentioned a case example of South Africa, and yeah, I read your article and your video about the whatever the anti-nuclear lobbies were doing in Kenya, and it was timely that you responded to them. They were saying nuclear, when they construct this project in Kenya, it will affect pregnant women, will give birth to children who are handicapped, and many other bad things they were mentioning. You gave a very good example what has happened in South Africa with the development of the nuclear. So maybe you can reemphasize those points about the the good things about the project.
Those people lied. Most of what they were saying in the media, the beds, it will affect their wildlife, the construction of nuclear or the existence of nuclear. It was all misinformation. Sorry to say lies because we in a professional environment, but it was just misinformation. And in my video, I addressed those misinformation and using the Uber as an example, because they even said Uber is not going to exist for the next 20 years or whatever, or they have not been given license or extension to operate for another 20 years, which was also misinformation because Uber, even though it's 40 years old, the first unit has been granted the life extension, so it will operate for the next coming 20 years again. So it was misinformation. That's what I did to address those misinformation. And what nuclear will do to Kenyan, or will do to Kenya is actually, it is obvious. I mean, if you look at Kuber, right now, there's almost 2,000 people working at Kuber, including Kenyans. So there's almost 2,000 people working at Kuber. Kuber has animals. We have zebras there. We have, birds. We have all these kind of animals that are beautiful, living freely, not affected by anything. And Kuber is built in a city that is considered the second best city in the world, which is Cape Town. And also, there's beautiful houses around Kuber. Everyone wants to go stay there. But the people who are staying there, they are anti-nuclear. I don't know how human brains work. It's people who are next to Kuber that mobilize to say we are anti-nuclear. I don't know what they will do. I don't even think Cape Town would be considered the best city if it didn't have Kuber. I always say that. I can't prove it, but yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, you highlighted a lot of benefits that has come as a result of the nuclear power in South Africa. And I believe that it's not just about Kenya. It's about the benefit that will have, transcends the national boundaries. I know if Kenya builds nuclear power plant, if Ghana builds, if Morocco, Egypt is doing construction currently, is one of the biggest projects we have in the nuclear industry. And there is a future in nuclear in Africa. And as you mentioned, so the thing is, how well can we mobilize among ourselves as youth-led initiatives with support of other stakeholders? How can that be realized?
When we have to address young people, how can you mobilize yourself? You're already doing it, by the way. I have to commend AYGN. They have chapters in how many countries? 22 countries. So they're already doing that. All that is needed is to, I think, help those YGNs with resources to be, I think, to do more than what they are doing now, because some of them, it's young people, they don't really have a clear direction of what then needs to happen after we have a chapter. And I have to say that, I have a problem with us, professionals. Sometimes I'm not a professional because I tend to be an activist. They're not activists, and activism is not for everyone. Some people, all they want is to secure their future, career path. They are careerists. I want maybe in 10 years' time to become the senior engineer in the company. And if you want that, you cannot be an activist, because we don't have future in these companies, because no one wants to deal with delinquents. So I think we need to empower young people, and some of them need to know that when you become an activist, then your career is limited. You will not be the future CEO. So it's that thin line that they need to understand. And again, they need to also, I think they need to be diverse in terms of their thinking. Some people need to be radical in terms of wanting to change the situations in their countries, because it will not be changed by professionalism, unfortunately. Wars are not won in the boardroom or in classrooms. They need to understand that wars are won on the streets. So they need to, yes, to sort of be empowered. By being empowered, and they need to learn from these other countries that have done it correctly, because there's no need in starting something new when there's already something that's working. I think the YGNs in Europe, in America, in South America, they need to help these small African YGNs who are starting, and help empower them with resources and knowledge on how to grow even bigger.
Thank you. Still on that, because it seems like we are forming the YGNs. A best example is this mobilization for COP. Many of those YGNs, they cite lack of support from the national governments. I mean, their countries cannot even recognize their efforts. And South Africa is a best example of a country that has advanced in nuclear industry. Young professionals, the network also is very strong, and there are some lessons that can be learned from there. I wanted you maybe to emphasize more so on like the successes that have happened in South Africa that other countries in Africa can borrow in terms of youth engagement, especially by the nuclear stakeholders. I'll give you two.
Maybe I should give this to my colleague from Gubert, because they've been doing very well in their chapter as young people. And she's also the deputy president of the South African Young Generation South African Young Professionals in Nuclear, Ms. Pozisa.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I may have missed the question.
We are talking about enhancing youth engagement in advocacy efforts. And I mentioned that some of the chapters that we have created in some countries where the nuclear industry is still nascent, they seem to be struggling a lot. Wherever even we write letters of support, they are not yet recognized by their countries. From the experiences your network has had over the years, what can you maybe share that can enhance the engagement of youth in these other countries? Thank you.
Okay, so I think with us as for Kobe Nuclear Power Plant, being the only nuclear power station that's operational in Africa gives us a greater responsibility in terms of our footprint and being known in public. So the one thing that we struggled with was, even in the power station, we were struggling to be known and to be felt as young people. So that meant that we had to be a bit radical in our approach, because obviously if we sit in our tiny corners, we won't get noticed. So in order for us to be noticed, we started taking initiative for our programs as young nuclear professionals, and started demanding time from the power station manager as well. So what we would do is that we'd have like a plan for the entire year, sit down in our private time, sit down, make a plan for the entire year, that how do we want to be recognized firstly. So we called it Enrich outreach. So Enrich is being recognized within the power station itself and what we do. And then outreach is what we do outside for the community, and engaging the community about nuclear. So the one project that we did beginning of the year was a shoe drive, where we gave two local schools, impoverished schools, school shoes for the kids in the schools. So the one was like a primary school and the one was a secondary school. And then when we do such initiatives, we get to advocate for nuclear to young kids of about 5 years old up until primary school level is up until 13 years old. And then with the high school as well, like your older kids, then we get to teach them about nuclear as well. So those are just some of the initiatives that we involve ourselves in. And then we also go to local churches as well, and then just make sure. And then the one very significant one that I can mention just before I close off was being involved with the public engagements for the National Nuclear Regulator. The National Nuclear Regulator had public engagements for the long-term operation of the power plant, since we wanted to extend the life period of the power plant to 20 more years. So what we did in order to assist was, as young nuclear professionals and as South African young nuclear professionals, we decided to ensure that we were involved in advocating for nuclear in those spaces, in those public engagements, where there were a lot, I can say there were more anti-nuclear organizations than there were pro-nuclear organizations. So that is the impact and the capacity building that we've been doing in our own capacity as young nuclear professionals of Quebec, and also forming part of the greater South African Young Nuclear Professional Society.
Thank you. I just want to add.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Since the question was asked to me. So last week, before I add what Posisa has said, last week the minister visited the organization that I work for, and one young person said, what is his plans in including young people in the project that has been approved in South Africa. It's not a power project, it's a research, it's a multi-purpose research reactor. And then his response was, what do you mean? Because there's a young woman who is making nuclear looks sexy. That's his line, sexy out there. And he was referring to me, because I do say that sometimes I look young. He was referring to me, and by saying that, he was saying to young people, you need to make things happen for yourself, because no one will really make things happen for you. But over and above what Posisa has said, she was talking about the Quebec chapter of SANEPS. What SANEPS did, I was still part of it many years ago when they were starting. They wrote a pledge to say, we are existing and this is what we are going to do. This is our programs, this is our vision, our mission and objectives. And they started mobilizing all the stakeholders. They went to the government Department of Energy, they went to NEXA, South African Nuclear Energy Corporation, they went to ESCOM and all these nuclear stakeholders and made them sign the pledge to say, we are going to support you. That's how they mobilized the support of these leaders and nuclear organizations. But the last thing I wanted to talk about was, I think I've forgotten. I'll think about it later.
Perhaps you can inject something from global industry, the support that is already existing and the efforts that you think can be done to enhance youth engagement, even in the global south, I mean the embanking countries.
Actually, we need to build a narrative. Because actually 50 years ago, people they were extremely glad to work for nuclear energy because it was a future progress. I take your word. It's a power of progress, and people they were extremely fond to go for progress. Industry was key for the younger generation. They were actually committing to nuclear, but it was also for space, for aviation, and so on. It was a future. It was Jules Verne. It was all this kind of stuff, and it was in the imagination a question of emotion. So nuclear was part of it. We had in front some advert talking about a drilling machine that was nuclear. Nuclear was something that was great, and we need to rebuild this kind of narrative. And this is true for Western countries. This is true also for Africa. And since you're going to have, you have already success story of South Africa, it might happen that we're going to have exactly the same for Egyptian nuclear power plant. And we had in Middle East with UAE. So it will prove to the world that effectively we can change the world in terms of progress. And once you have done that, because one of the particularities of nuclear, that people, when they are living close to a nuclear power plant, they are extremely happy. Extremely happy. Only people living in big cities very far away from nuclear power plant are criticizing nuclear because they don't know anything about nuclear. So if we can build on this success story, we can change the narrative, and then it's going to be easier for the young generation, to convince. But you're right, Princess, it's a problem of leadership also. If the leaders are not convinced, or they believe that they will not be elected because actually public acceptance is not there, they will turn away. So we need to convince them, we need to convince the public in order to force the politicians to be in a position to give long-term commitment for this kind of energy. Because if we don't have this kind of backup, it's very difficult to progress.
Thank you so much. So I'll open maybe for some few questions, then they will make a wrap up.
Hello, I'm Nico from the European Law Students Association, and I would also like to ask a question, maybe a bit more pertinent to the legal professional field, but also to nuclear, because so in our association we also do advocacy, mostly based on international treaties, rulings of international courts, but also like generally admitted legal standards. And I see you mentioned, for example, some problems in the system which make nuclear harder to not only adopt but also implement after it's been approved. For example, you mentioned different standards that are kept for nuclear as opposed to other renewables, but then also in the implementation process, the abstractly unrelated but actually very important procedural matters, which then make it harder to implement. And then my question here is, from the experience of countries which you are only lobbying in to actually implement this type of energy, but also from countries which have been very successful to make this very explosive success story. Do you think there are some prerequisites in the legal system that help advance nuclear, and what are maybe the problems in the legal system? I'm asking this because of, for example, our standpoint for advocacy, which is always based on implementing legal changes and addressing policymakers. Did I make it too long? Is it clear? Okay, thank you.
So Princess gave me the mic. Thank you. Thank you, Princess. Basically, in terms of legal, whatever the case, nuclear will be always more difficult to implement than renewables. Okay, it's not the same energy. We need to be safe. As we say, when I was power plant manager, I was saying, power generation is my business, safety is my duty. Okay, so there is nothing to compare about that. We need to be strong on that, and it's a way also to favor public acceptance. If you're strict on that, then public trust you, and then in this case you can be on a long-term basis. So there is no concern. Of course it is, but you need also a strong political willingness. So you need a nuclear program. People need to tell clearly to the population, we will head this way. We want a nuclear program, and it's going to take decades to build it. But at the end of the day, we're going to be stronger, we're going to be safer, and we're going to be more powerful in terms of country. So that's important. After that, in terms of regulatory requirements, of course, we need a strong regulator. When China started their business 30 years ago, they built at the same time the regulatory requirements, at the same time they were building as a nuclear program. And actually France supported China for regulatory requirements and supported China for nuclear development. It was side by side, but you need to develop both at the same time. Clearly you need strong infrastructure. And that's the reason why we need to start right away in Africa in order, to back up this system. It was the same thing for Coburg, a strong assistance, and I know because some of my spare parts went to Coburg when you were in trouble in Coburg. So I know very well that we need to support also. It's our duty also. I would say countries with strong nuclear fleet to help support also newcomers. It's our duty. But again, you don't need so much legal aspect, except that you need a strong political willingness, and this starts with a nuclear program. And actually, when you look at the IEA website, we have a section dedicated to newcomers. The first step is to implement a nuclear program with an APO, I would say an organization in charge to implement this program in order to build the infrastructure to support this kind of program. So we lost this kind of approach in our countries because we had everything available, but it's not the case for Africa. So clearly we need to start by that. A strong political willingness.
Yes, but just to add, over and above the strong political will, you also need to be transparent in these processes. Because I think in South Africa, the issue is not just the technology, it's about transparency. Because people believe that government is corrupt. So if government is going to be in charge of this huge mega project, then there will be more corruption than anyone expect. So people want transparency in terms of these processes. But I do believe that nuclear is subjected to more regulations than other technologies.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. My name's Grace Taylor. I'm still in university, and my question kind of relates to understanding and communicating risks. So I'm curious how you communicate the risk of nuclear energy, especially around the radioactive waste, to young people without kind of causing concern. For example, where I'm from, there was a nuclear meltdown in the state next to me, and it caused significant health risks. So I know that that's super rare, but how do you communicate these risks, even if they are small? Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I think that when it comes to risks about nuclear, it should be the same way that you communicate the benefits, really, because in terms of nuclear waste, I don't even see it as a risk. The CEO of the Radioactive Waste Disposal Institute in South Africa, when we had a conference last month, he said he was talking to young people to say, you better choose. Do you want to be part of the program that will in 60 years not exist, or do you want to be part of the project that will exist for the next 100 years? Meaning that that's a benefit of this of waste disposal, because that means people work there for donkey years to come. So it's the same way that we communicate risks. And some people actually in Africa, whenever the anti-nuclear lobbyists, they like referring to Chernobyl, referring to what's the other one, Fukushima, and they leave South Africa right next to them. I'm like, why do you even go far? Why are you not learning from South Africans? Because it means that we are capable of operating a nuclear power plant as Africans. And I need to change that narrative, because people want to put us in a situation where we are defensive, and it's wrong. We need to be proactive in communicating our messages so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have to defend ourselves. And this industry has been defending itself for a very long time, and that needs to change.
Thank you so much. You want to add something on?
I guess it's right. It's all matters of cost benefit. Whatever the case, whatever you do, you need to manage the cost, but also the benefit. And of course, nuclear energy brings much more benefit than cost than any other energy. When you compare to the kilowatt hour produced, there is no photo with other energies. And the example of Fukushima is quite nice, because everybody is talking about Fukushima as the biggest, after Chernobyl, nuclear disaster and so on. And actually, it was three fatalities. 20,000 people died from the tsunami. 20,000 people died from the tsunami, and nobody talks about that. So the real problem is a perception, and we need to rebuild a narrative and to tell them, okay, and waste management is not really an issue. It's not really an issue. The volume of waste generated by nuclear is so few compared to other energy, so it's really manageable. But we need to explain that. We need to be transparent with the public, and once we do that, in this case, we can get them on board and have that completely accepted.
Thank you so much. Maybe we take one or two, and then we'll have the panelists wrap up.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christabel. I work with the Regulatory Authority. Okay. My brother.
I'm sorry, Nwana.
Go ahead, one name.
Thank you. I've been an activist for 5 years now, and I'm still frustrated by the way that the industry treats all these issues like they're not there, especially in the US. I have been at events where people from Electricité de France are there, and in the booth, there's not a single mention of the word nuclear. They're talking about all of their projects. And you ask, and they're so proud and so talking about what they're doing. And you ask about nuclear, and they're like, well. So I see that even from the industry, there's a lack of pride in what we're doing. There's a lack of belief. And it really honestly frustrates me, because the other thing is that there's very few investment I see in outreach programs. Like PG&E is a really bad example with Diablo Canyon. They tell you, oh, this plant is super safe. It's going to save the world. Can we go there? No, that's too dangerous. Like, dude, it's one thing or the other. So what can we do to make sure that the industry sees the value, reaching out to people and having educational programs and opening themselves? Because I see a lot of secrecy and I see a lot of not promoting. Like, I had no clue that you have zebras around your plant because there's no promotion of that. In the US, it's the same. We have wildlife preserves around our plants, but nobody knows about it. So what can we do to make the industry more proactive and work with us as activists?
I like that you mentioned the secret, the industry being secretive, because that's the actual problem. This industry loves secrets. It's like we are handling this delicate thing that is not supposed to be seen by people and only by us. And we have these big terminologies that people don't understand, and it's not helping us. And I don't know if we should blame the regulators. Because, I mean, not long ago, we wanted to broadcast live from the reactor where I work, and it was denied. And I don't know why it is denied, because people cannot believe what they don't see. And that needs to change. The regulators, IAEA and the local regulators, they need to sit down in their conferences that they hold almost every month. They need to sit down and see how they can change that so that they give public access to these power plants. And I thought US is even doing a better job in communicating nuclear than us. So I'm surprised to hear that they also are not, because whenever I speak on my videos, TikTok videos, I make an example about the US, what they are doing, how many power plants they have, because I thought that you guys are better. And I still think that the US is better than other countries. But regulators, they are not doing us any favor by saying we should keep secrets. There are no secrets in a nuclear power plant. There's nothing there. And I don't know why we should be secretive. But do you want to add?
Actually, it's a good point, because what we were doing when I was a nuclear power plant manager is to open the doors and to tell the people, test by yourself. Come, see, and make your mind. And you'll see. We are not, living in another planet or whatever, and we are not hiding anything from you. It's very safe, and you see that you have a lot of professionals. Actually, the best ambassadors from nuclear power plant are the people that are working inside a nuclear power plant, because they tell their relatives, they tell all the neighbors and so on, hey guys, there is nothing secret about that. We are very strong professionals. We are extremely keen about safety and so on. That's the reason why also we need to be extremely strong on safety, to show the people and to build the trust. Now, to answer your question about industry. 5 years ago, it was a shame to talk about nuclear. Even myself, my daughter, I couldn't tell my dad is a nuclear power plant manager. So basically, it's only a few years ago that we changed a little bit the minds, because essentially we put on the top of the agenda the climate change. And then when you do that, you know that nuclear is part of the business. And then you can start bringing people to talk about nuclear. But the industry is a little bit shy. They prefer to have the operators frontline, because if somebody goes wrong, they have a lot of clients that are not in the nuclear industry. So they prefer sometimes to be a little bit shy and to hide behind the operators. But now we need to have them also on board. Also, they are young professionals to promote this kind of energy, because it's something that will bring so much to our country. It's not something that in 20 years, when you build, okay, I have nothing against the renewables and windmills, but anyway, when you talk about windmill, you buy a windmill, but it's one or two people operating a windmill, maybe remotely. When you talk about new nuclear power plants, you're talking about thousands of people living around a nuclear power plant, and a very strong professional, educated, and so on. And you disseminate that to all the country. So it's so beneficial, and it's local. It's local. You know, of course, you're going to bring the steam generators and so on, maybe from somewhere else. But concrete, all this kind of stuff is local, and it brings so much to the economy. So I guess we shall not be shy about that. But I agree. Sometimes the industry, you know, they prefer to have the operator frontline. It's better, I mean, to hide a little bit. And once nuclear will be a new star, maybe they will pop up to try to defend this industry.
I just want to add, he mentioned that the workers should be ambassadors of nuclear, the nuclear workers. But let me tell you, the people who know how a reactor operates or what's even happening in the company are those people who work in that building only. You'd be surprised that where I work, I started a campaign where I teach the worker, you know, taking the worker to the to see the reactor. People who have been in that company for 40 years have never seen that reactor. So how are they going to be ambassadors? So again, young people who are in these nuclear power plants, do those campaigns, start taking people, workers, to see how the reactor works, because it helps a lot for them. It's really embarrassing to have people who don't understand what the company that they work for does, because people in HR, they really don't know what's happening in this company. They're just there to do their HR work. So that needs to change. I have another story. I have so many stories. You'd swear I'm 60 years old. There was a gentleman, okay, a lady, she's old. She wanted to surprise her husband, who worked in a research reactor 60 years ago. And it was a surprise. They drove to the organization, you know, as they were approaching, because the husband didn't know where they were going. As they were approaching, the husband goes like, and he sees the car turning to the plant, and then he goes like, "Don't go there! We're not allowed to go there!" And she's like, "Yes, we are." He was serious and very scared that that car is turning into that plant, because it's the same plant that where nuclear weapons were at. So in the olden days, no one was allowed to even go past there. So he still thinks that's happening. Can you imagine the ambassadors that we have in this industry? People who are telling people that don't even go near that place. People are not allowed. So that's what we are facing.
Thank you so much for your story. And can we take one, then you make just quick closing remarks, please?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm a coach Christabel, and fortunately, I'm with the regulator. So it's a very interesting topic, a very interesting discussion. I just wanted to add to the waste, because she talked about the risks about communicating waste. Now, when you are talking about the risks of communicating waste, it's the same thing like communicating about the waste from fossil fuel, from solar, from renewables. In fact, the waste generated from renewable, from solar and wind, is even higher than what you get from the nuclear. The batteries, the panels, we hardly have even recycling factories for that. So it's even higher, it's more than that of fossil fuel from an oil producing country. The waste, the damage it causes to the environment. In fact, nuclear is better, far cheaper, far reliable, more friendly, environmental friendly than fossil fuel. So when you are castigating, when people come out and demonize nuclear due to the waste is so small. You've seen pictures of people hugging the cast where the waste is kept. It doesn't, if, as she said, as the panelists have said, people living around the environment don't complain. Yeah, but those living outside, very far off, tend to want to influence those living in the environment. That is bad. It's not bad. It's very easy and it's environmentally friendly. And I wanted to add to my question on the communication parts. I feel most scientists, people working in that environment, they're not communicators. I think that's one of the challenges we are having. Most of them are maths, physics, chemistry. When it comes to communicating, I really want to see a situation where there's a synergy between both the young generation in Europe, in America, Middle East, working or collaborating with African young generation. Not only that, the World Nuclear Association, other big, well-renowned old bodies, working with the young generation to teach them how to communicate. It's just few people in the industry communicating. As we can see, we have our Princess Mthombeni here. If you check the average people communicating, I'm sure she's the only one in Africa doing that communication factor. So we need to educate, we need to train people how to talk, what to say, how to communicate to the environment, to the public. Then on the issue of the regulation, I'm happy hearing this. So we will learn from South Africa. I think it's something other countries should learn. Nuclear power should not be hidden. People coming to, I think in Nigeria is different. We carry students. They come to our research reactor and we do visits, industrial visits, yes, in our research reactor. So it's a bit different. It's something that we have to learn and take note of. Thank you.
Thank you for the additions and thank you, members. Let's have closing remarks, just quick.
Maybe I guess everything was said, but clearly, if we are based on scientific data or whatever, nuclear ranks first. So there is no issue on that in terms of energy. But we need to build a narrative and to teach people how to communicate on this, because clearly what believes the people is completely different from the truth. And clearly the young generation, we need to educate them not only in terms of scientific approaches, as was mentioned, but also how to communicate on those issues. So I guess, Princess, you're a professional on those, so you might be more insightful in this topic.
Thank you so much. I recently visited a wind plant, invited by renewables. You see, I'm not anti-renewables. They like me. So I visited the wind plant, and I even went inside a wind turbine. I have a video coming out. You see, I have a video coming out of the wind turbine. I know what's happening, and they allowed me to say whatever I want to say about it, as long as it's factual. Even if I have to say 3 wind turbines were turning at that time out of 165. You see, so it's that we need, as the nuclear industry, we need to learn from those people. Let's invite people who are not even in the industry. Yesterday on the panel session with Sama and the IAEA, I said their programs, they mostly accept people who come from the nuclear industry, and that needs to change. We need to open up to people who come from gas industry, oil industry, coal industry, renewables industry, because I can guarantee you, by the time they leave that program, especially if it's Summer Institute or any program by the World Nuclear University, those people would be converted to be nuclear advocates. Another story, the last one. 5 years ago, we hosted the parliamentarian team. I think it's called the Committee on Energy. On the Parliamentary Committee on Energy, which includes the people who come from different political parties. And there was one member who came from the Democratic Alliance Party who was anti-nuclear then. When we hosted them, by the time he left the nuclear plant, he was pro-nuclear. And you see, we can change people by just doing that.
Thank you so much for the insights and, of course, the inspiration for the young people to be involved. I want to take this opportunity to really thank you, audience, for your active listening and participation. I hope that going into the future, there will be more meaningful engagement, broadening the stakeholder engagement, as you mentioned, from non-nuclear, non-technical guys. And you mentioned communication. Actually, you're doing well because you are a communication expert, and communicating matters nuclear is your passion, and we love that. So I want just to really thank you in a special way for finding time. Didier, I know it was hard to find you, but thank you for availing. Princess, we still have more other platforms to engage, and I believe that these voices has to be scaled up, have to be escalated to reach the non-converted. I think mostly the nuclear community has been speaking to itself, just converted. We want now to open doors to all who are not nuclear professionals, those who are not even working in the nuclear field. Like we can have deliberate campaigns to reach out to every other office, public office, non-state offices, and every other platform that we can share the good news about nuclear. Thank you, and we'll invite you for another event tomorrow, 4 to 5 at Zambian Pavilion. Thank you very much. Picture with the.